All right. Who is Gatillo Vargas? Your new best friend, that's who. The reason I say that is the last 4 years they've asked a question about that you could answer it with one Latin American country and how they dealt with the Great Depression. And so Vargas is an excellent choice for this question, and that's why we focus on him, or we will focus on him for the next week and a half. Vargas was the son of a wealthy cattle ranchers in Rio Grande do Sul. He originally was going to become a part of the military. That was one of the places that the elite sent their children. But basically, after 2 years of a cadet, he obviously spent a lot of time down in border skirmishes with the Argentines over dispute over cattle, because they both ranched in that area. And so he thought the military was his natural place, but after 2 years of being a cadet, he decided he didn't like it, so he went to study law. He practiced law in Rio Grande do Sul for a short period of time, and then joined politics. He was Washington Luis's finance minister for 2 years, between 1976 and 1928, and became the governor of Rio Grande do Sul. So this is not somebody who hadn't spent any time in politics, but somebody who had spent time and was familiar with the government. Basically, he ran against the official or the handpicked successor, Prestes, in the election. He ran on the platform. This was his ideas, or what he was running on. And number one was amnesty for the rebels of 1922 to 26. So the Tenentes and other rebels that were against the coffee oligarchy. He basically said amnesty, which is forgiveness, for them, and that is part of why they supported him. New election laws, basically, to open up elections and make them more fair, and allow everybody to be a part of them, kind of take away the power of the political machines around the country. Social legislation, a reorganization of the educational and judicial systems, and accelerated economic development. Those planks seem to promise change and modernization. So a rebellion happens, Vargas is the leader, and he steps up. So the question is, what does Vargas seem to offer Brazil? More of the same, or does this seem like real change? Because he's not somebody that's new, but he is somebody that is from the elite. He's not from the people, but elite itself. So, changes in Brazil, October Revolution, old political machines and oligarchies. He has to make some major change, and basically most of the government was run by political machines that are using it for their own advantage. The oligarchy, the coffee oligarchy, other oligarchies in the different provinces, all kind of are going to put pressure on Vargas and this new idea of government. So currently, three main groups push Vargas for power, push Vargas into power. Middle-class laborers, Tenentes.
There's a quick SBA meeting happening in room 35B at 2:50.
Which is considered the October Club of 1931, and liberal constitutionalists. Now, this group doesn't necessarily all fit together. The Tenentes want Vargas to take control and take power almost like a dictator, whereas the liberal constitutionalists obviously want to make some changes to the Constitution and allow it to be a true democracy, whereas the middle class and the laborers, they want support for industry. So, provisional government. New government had 4 central differences from the governments of the past. Number 1, political autonomy by centralizing power with the federal government. Vargas had a strong, concentrated power, and people were suspicious of his stalling. His new government had 4 central differences from the oligarchies of the past. He wanted to centralize power. His economic policy was all about promotion of industry. Now, originally, he wanted to promote industry much faster, but so he does know that his economic policy is going to have to take some time to develop. Social policy, he wanted to protect the workers, and also in protection to workers, He knew that that would help industry, and that giving a minimum wage or that type of thing might help distribute the wealth. And also he knew that this could be his political support. These could be the people that supported him over time. And then armed forces were central to his role. One of the ways that Vargas was able to hold on to power was because of the way his government treated the military. The military in 1920 had 36,000 members. By the time of 1935 or 1937, there was 750,000 members of the armed forces. And so he grew the military to extreme. All the military received raises, and most of the generals that were in power by 1937 were people that he promoted. And so Vargas worked with the military and gave them a central role. He also took, and this is one of the reasons the numbers are so high, he took the state militias. All the states had basically their own private army. He took those armies and put them under the central government and put them under the central army. By doing this, what he is basically saying is that they all need to be behind or with my main government. And the idea in doing this was to take power away from the states so that they couldn't rebel and put it under the central government. So the political autonomy, the use of the army, basically his first steps were to consolidate power. November 1930, Vargas assumed both the executive and legislative power. He basically said the legislature that was together is no longer, and then he worked with the church to get control in the central government. And he created what's called an inventor's code. And this established basically leaders that would disband the legislature in the states and basically rule over the state and report only to Vargas. And this was meant to kind of give the government a lot more control so that they could then help with the different changes that needed to happen. And he felt like if he didn't take control, that the change would not have happened. The state could no longer contract. He also said that the state could no longer contract or create foreign loans without consulting with the central government. They could spend no more than 10% on their state police, 10% of the government money on state police, basically saying that you can only have so much, and that they took basically all of the state militia away. And then they said that the state police could not have equipment similar to the federal military. They had to have equipment that was much less. Basically trying to take all the power away from the states and to keep them from rebelling against the federal government. And so the question is, what changes do these edicts bring about for Brazil? What changes does the centralizing of power bring? Basically, they brought a challenge to Vargas. Vargas made a mistake here, and that was that he put an inventor that was a tenente, was part of the October 3rd Club in the Revolution. And he put one of them basically in charge of São Paulo. And basically, he had to face São Paulo in a revolution. São Paulo basically was upset that they had put an inventor that was trying to take away their power. They were upset by the fact that now that São Paulo does not have as much control or idea of what's happening, they're not controlling what's going on. And so he assumed, because he assumed all executive and legislative power, his inventor code takes away state power. General Lopes, the leader of the Tenentes, was given control of the military in São Paulo. The inventor, José Alberto, instituted a higher minimum wage and redistributed lands to Army veterans. And so basically, that General Lopes, the leader of Tenentes, was given control of the military in São Paulo. The inventor, José Alberto, instituted a higher minimum wage and redistributed lands to Army veterans. Basically, this is where most of the workers were by raising their minimum wage. That's kind of in line with Vargas' policies. Redistributed land to Army veterans, took care of Army veterans, but this obviously took land from the elites in São Paulo. The Paulistas accused Alberto of communism because he's distributing land. And remember, if you don't like somebody, you call him a communist. And Vargas, in an effort to appease them, replaced him. They saw this as a weakness. They saw Vargas as backing down here. And so the Paulistas thought Vargas was weak, and they rebelled. Their rebellion was crushed in 3 months. But this puts Vargas in a weird spot because here is the situation. You have the most powerful state with some of the richest people in Brazil that you are going to need in order to make true change. So what do? Well, in this case, he passes the Economic Adjustment Act. He reduces the debts of the planters, has the Bank of Brazil assume their war debt, and he forgives them. Now, this angers some of the people in his government. The army isn't happy about this. Kind of tweaks them a little bit because they feel like they had put down this rebellion, and it annoyed them that he was forgiving them. At the same time, it brought São Paulo and gave them a role within his government, a role within the new Brazil. So problems that he is facing and tries to address with his social reforms. Social issues: schools, lifespan, racial tension, and inequality. Revolution in Sao Paulo, and he follows that with forgiveness. Why? Because he needs them. Now, because he's been in power for over 2 years now, he'd done very little that he promised. And so he needed to start coming through with some of the promises, some of the platform that he had put forward. So the Electoral Code of 1932, it added the liberal voting age from 21 to 18, extended suffrage to working women, said that working women now have the ability to vote, and guaranteed the secret ballot. Because up until this point, people had to make their vote or what they were as well known, and their employers and everybody knew how they voted. And so a secret ballot would allow people to vote the way they were. But the code still left out the illiterate out of the process. It did include all races. It lowered the wage. It allowed working women. And women voting in Latin America was not something that was very common. And so this is definitely something moving Brazil forward. At the same time, illiterate people are still left out of the process, which is a large majority of of Brazilians. The Constitutional Assembly, May 3rd, 1933. In addition, started a Constitutional Assembly, guaranteed free elections, had a new electoral tribunal to supervise elections and count returns. The new document maintained and strengthened the federal system and delegated wider power to the executive. These are all things that Vargas wanted. The new labor tribunal had the power to fix minimum wages and was now part of the federal government. Sections on labor and the family and culture expanded the social consciousness of the government. The new legislature had to include 50 people from labor, industry, and liberal professionals, which was similar to actually Mussolini in Italy, but giving basically the industrial people a voice in the government. And the president could serve for 4 years and not be able to succeed himself. And here's the issue. When he brought together the Constitutional Assembly, it wasn't all people that supported Vargas as the leader and Vargas as the dictator, which some of his supporters did. It was mainly a lot of the people the liberal constitutionalists wanted to vote, and so they pushed that the president could only serve 4 years. Now, that doesn't necessarily work well. Sometimes you need leaders in there longer, but they wanted to basically, that was aimed at Vargas to keep Vargas from being able to stay in control. And like I said, 50 class representatives. So women, the family was represented in the government. There was sections on labor. The new labor tribunal could set wages, could set all these different things, and basically gave the government some power to bring about some of the changes that needed to happen. So let's look at the economic problems. Now that he's brought the states under control, now that he's centralized power, now that he has a lot of power, what is he going to do to solve the economic problems of the country? The problems, mercantilist system, basically, where they sell 1 to 2, 3 products that they're experts on to the countries that need them, and then those countries sell the manufactured goods, and Brazil's trade is always at a deficit because manufactured goods cost more than primary goods, and so forever there will be a trade deficit that the Brazilians will have and basically not have money to reinvest in their economy. The collapse of the coffee industry in Sao Paulo. Land ownership. So the collapse of the coffee basically means that they have to find other ways. What are they going to do? Basically, 461 landowners held more than 27 million hectares of land. We've talked about this, while 464,000 owned 15.7 million acres. And we're going to look at some graphs tomorrow to look at how much did Vargas really change this. Use the hoe and slash and burn techniques. Even the forward planters did not take care of the soil. They did not have access to fertilizers, and they didn't have access to the most common or the most modern types of farming. And so that is something that Vargas tried to fix. And also needing to solve this need to import food. Government declining revenues, no ability to get foreign loans, imports fall. A 75% decrease between 1921 to 1932. And yet, that number offers some hope. However, this trade imbalance gives Brazil capital. The U.S. imports went from 445.9 million to 180 million, meaning that Brazil then was selling more than it was importing, and that meant that there is money that those landowners who are still selling their coffee, still selling the sugar, could reinvest into other products. So how do you think Vargas will address these problems? You could take a minute and kind of jot down some thoughts. How do you think he will address the problems? So let's talk about it. Vargas' solutions. The National Department of Coffee basically created the National Council, which was later changed to the National Department of Coffee, and proved flexible in its various plans to revive and relieve the plight of the planters. He needed the coffee planters. These are the main economic source. He can't just abandon coffee. At once, the National Department of Coffee ordered a reduction in coffee tree planting. The number of trees went from 1.7 billion in 1920 to 3 billion in 1934. Then slowly went down to 2.5 billion in 1939 and 2.3 in 1942 because he banned all new coffee tree planting. And by doing that, it slowly brought a decline in the amount of coffees. 1931, the government stated program of coffee burning. Started burning the stores that the government had already bought. Before the end of the decade, approximately 60 million bags of coffee was destroyed. The idea is the same as the AAA. Let's get rid of this. Now, they used some of the methods that were used in valorization, but this is not valorization. This is the National Department of Coffee policies. The variations of valorization, as well as an international agreement with other coffee-producing states, were tried with minimal success. The government didn't have enough money to continue to buy the coffee interest. They tried, and they tried to keep that going, but they weren't able to do that. Brazil's coffee trade only recovers with the advent of World War II. The financial renewal by stopped paying on its debt and gave power to exchange money to the Bank of Brazil. So the Bank of Brazil then was to exchange money. They stopped and tried to buy back some of the gold, but they basically put themselves off the gold standard and basically said that we are not paying on our financial debt. They basically defaulted on the debt. And so the financial renewal, they could use that any money they had then to reinvest into Brazil rather than go the other way. He gave the power of the Bank of Brazil to fund and help industry, to help planters grow new land. He also offered loans to people with low interest rates that wanted to create more diversification. Well, a lot of the coffee problems did not necessarily solve the problems that were there. Skidmore, a historian, actually points to Vargas intentionally alienating Sao Paulo by being slow to move towards a constitutional government and sending outsiders to rule Sao Paulo. He gave out the olive branch by calling for a constitutional assembly and by having the Bank of Brazil take over their loans and with the get rid of their loan act and the forgiveness. of those people. So, coffee burning, order reduction of the plants, international agreements, Brazil's coffee trade, financial rule after World War II. So he tried a lot of different coffee issues, but it was pretty much unsuccessful. The coffee programs are essential to the rest of Vargas's plans for the economy, and yet a lot of them tended to be unsuccessful. However, when coffee begins, the demand for coffee comes back by 1932 and begins to go back up. A lot of that money then could be reinvested. One of the things he tried was, this is the amount of coffee they were burning. 70% of the stocks were being burnt at one point, and this was just trying to get coffee back. They were trying to get coffee back to its pre-levels. So we will continue this discussion on the economics tomorrow. We'll start with that. We'll finish that and basically break down Vargas's first years in office.